Chapter 3 Friday, March 29th to Sunday, March 31st, 2013. By Thursday morning, the doctors had begun giving Jenny the anti-seizure med Keppra, as well as repeating the entire battery of tests that were done during her first visit to the ER the day before. Once again, all of the tests were normal, so the plan became to observe Jenny for a couple of days while allowing the Keppra to begin working and ensure the seizures were under control. The current diagnosis for the cause of the seizures was that Jenny was experiencing the onset of epilepsy. It was on Friday morning that Barb and I first began to notice change in Jenny's behavior. In discussing it, we agreed that something was off, but even as we talked, we couldn't put a finger on it. It was just something a parent would notice, even if we couldn't define it. Although her behavior was odd, it wasn't dramatic enough to make us terribly uncomfortable. But we did mention it to the doctor and were told that it was likely caused by Jenny's body adjusting to the Keppra. We had read a lot about the drug by this time, and knew the side effects as well as the pros and cons, most specifically, unusual mood or behavior changes. So we easily accepted the doctor's explanation. Even today, I have no doubt the doctors were doing the best they could given the facts presented to them. Jenny's change in behavior was definitely subtle enough to be missed by anyone that didn't know her well. It was even difficult for Barb and I to quantify in our minds. The odd behavior that Jenny began to exhibit can best be summed up as hyperactivity, but it initially only came in short spurts, a few seconds at a time. Jenny would get so full of energy that she had a hard time sitting still, and she would talk loudly. Although her words were clear and each sentence made sense, there was no overall logic to what she was saying. She seemingly spoke every thought that crossed her mind. There were short bursts of this behavior, and then she would return to normal for long periods. This made it very easy to dismiss the behavior as a reaction to the medication. The blood tests to confirm the Keppra levels met what the doctors felt was appropriate continued through that day. And adjustments were made as deemed necessary. As far as the doctors were concerned, the day was progressing nicely. But Barb and I saw Jenny getting weirder with each passing hour. The doctors and nurses listened to our concerns and talked to Jenny to get a feel for it themselves. But the behavior was difficult to define in a way for the doctors to identify it. In addition, because it came and went so rapidly, more often than not, we were the only ones in the room with her when it was exhibited. I didn't recognize it then, but there was also a subtle attribute of Jenny being able to act completely normal when any non-family member was present. This would be a phenomenon that would continue throughout her illness. About 3 p.m. on Friday, the doctors decided that Jenny's seizures were under control, as she hadn't had one for more than 40 hours after experiencing the first two within 8 hours. The medication was at a level that their experience dictated was appropriate, and thus the paperwork process started to discharge her from the hospital. Barb and I had concerns, but we didn't think those concerns merited keeping Jenny in the hospital. We didn't push it any further with the doctors, especially since she knew Jenny would be seeing a neurologist at an appointment scheduled for the following Friday, a week away. However, Barb was concerned enough that our car was barely moving out of the hospital parking lot before she had her phone in hand to make an appointment for Jenny to be seen by her primary care doctor. The appointment was set for the upcoming Monday. Jenny went home to the apartment that evening. John had also noticed changes in Jenny's behavior and remained attuned to them as the weekend progressed. When John dropped Jenny off at our house on Sunday, the 31st, Easter Sunday, he told us it was getting worse. While the change was subtle on an hour-by-hour basis, not having seen Jenny for nearly 48 hours, we immediately noticed a significant change compared to how she was behaving Friday evening. Jenny's younger sister Michelle had come home for the holidays and immediately noticed Jenny's odd behavior as well. Barb always prepares amazing meals on the holidays, and this one was no exception. I was a bit surprised when we sat down as a family on Sunday evening for dinner, and Jenny didn't eat much of anything. In hindsight, I guess I should have seen it as another sign that something was wrong with her. Instead, I attributed it to the fact that Jenny's tongue was sore and severely swollen due to having bitten it a number of times during the seizures. I know now that it was ultimately a prelude to what was to come, as Jenny's appetite ultimately dwindled to nothing over the coming weeks. By Sunday evening, Jenny's behavior was becoming more of an issue. Overall, it could still be described as hyperactivity, but it was escalating. Jenny was talking almost constantly, going on, and what she talked about had become mostly nonsensical. It was as if the thoughts in her head were racing at an impossible pace, faster than she could express them, yet she seemed to have the need to verbally express everything that crossed her mind. Perhaps I was being liberal with what I was willing to accept, but I told myself that everything she was exhibiting so far matched the list of possible side effects of the Keppra. The doctors had warned us that it might take a while for her to adjust to the medication. At this point, it wasn't as much concerning as it was just weird. All of us went for a walk on Sunday evening, figuring that the exercise would help calm Jenny down. During the entire walk, she was speaking very fast, but making little sense. Interestingly, Jenny recognized that she was hyperactive, and she also had no control over it, so her overactive mind went to work on the problem. As Jenny would come up with an idea in her mind as to why she was acting so hyper, without taking time to first think it all the way through, she would exclaim, "I figured it out," and then follow with a fast, albeit partial, explanation of what was going on in her head. Each time Jenny believed she had reached a monumental, irrefutable conclusion. At the end of each explanation, which never had any real logic to it, she would then ask, "Don't you get it?" When each of us would answer no, Jenny would simply start over and repeat the same incomprehensible explanation almost word for word as her first attempt. Yet her mind was working so fast that within minutes she would abandon each of her explanations and come up with yet another concept and again exclaim, "I figured it out," and would begin again. This process repeated itself nearly a dozen times during our walk of about 45 minutes. Even though Jenny didn't seem to realize that she wasn't making any sense, she did understand that her audience was unable to comprehend what she was attempting to explain. She became frustrated and sometimes even angry at whomever she was speaking to, which consequently seemed to make the thoughts spinning in her mind race even faster. The demons in Jenny's head already had a grip, but they were just starting to show themselves. While I knew something wasn't quite right, it still wasn't entirely clear that anything was seriously wrong. I continued to accept that it was just a reaction to the medication. Yet, as uncomfortable as we were with the changes we were witnessing in Jenny, it proved to be nothing compared to what we will see over the next 4 days and the weeks to come.